Hello, everybody, and welcome to Symmetry Solution Strategies. This is Natasha Helfer Parker, and every Friday, right around lunchtime, Mountain Standard Time, we try our best to make ourselves available as a panel, some of us from Symmetry Solutions, in regards to typically answering a question from the audience that comes in. So if you have questions that you want us to address, make sure that you list those either on the threads here, or you can always private message one of us, me in particular, so that we make sure your question goes on the queue, as they would say. But today we want to kind of continue a little bit of the conversation that we had last week. Lisa Butterworth came on with me, and we had some discussions about understanding concepts like racism, systemic racism, intergenerational oppression, and how those words like privilege are being used currently in kind of anti-racist processes and efforts. And at the same time, there can be a lot of disagreement or a lot of difficulty in understanding what those kinds of terms mean, specifically from white folks that, kind of tend to take an affront to some of that in regards to feeling like it's a personal attack, et cetera. So we are very committed here at Symmetry, one, to do our own work. As you know, we're a primarily white organization in regards to just our how we present. But so we want to do our own work, but we're also committed in helping those who might have access to our resources to help explain and talk about these topics from a mental health and wellness perspective, because that's what we are very dedicated to, is the mental well-being and health of not only ourselves as individuals, but ourselves as communities. And communities are hopefully diverse and and full of full of different kinds of people coming from different backgrounds and different ideas. So how do we do that well? So today, to join me, I've got three of our panelists. I've got Jana Spangler, who is one of our wellness coaches here in Salt Lake City, Utah area. I've got Jennifer White, who is also here in the Salt Lake kind of general area, one of our therapists, and one of our newer providers, Caron, who has just recently joined us, also in Salt Lake City, correct? I think you just recently moved here, Caron, is that right?
Yeah, I'm up more towards Ogden, but yeah.
Okay. So in that area, so we're all Utah-esque today. We have providers from different parts of the country, but today we are primarily here in Utah. And we thought we would talk a little bit about kind of the process of, I was thinking about it more from the process, especially coming from like a Mormon background, the repentance process or the growth process of how we get from one stage to another in ways that we take responsibility, don't fall into kind of gaslighting type of efforts, or have our own biases get in the way, which I don't know how anybody doesn't get their own biases in the way. I mean, that's a constant issue, I think, for all human beings, is that we're going to get our biases in the way. So we wanted to talk a little bit today about just how do we get into spaces where we can listen to other people's perspectives, which is a generally difficult thing to do as a human. And then once we're in those spaces, how can we consider the concepts of apology or restoration or renovation as forms towards healing? What do we know about that in the individual perspective that then we can kind of correlate to a systemic perspective? So that's our hope today. So I guess, Caron, I'm going to ask you to start talking, because you kind of came up with the idea of, why don't we start from this perspective of the importance of just acknowledgement. Any thoughts that you have about just why it's difficult to acknowledge anything that might be different from your current point of view?
Absolutely. So my thoughts on that in regards to what our country is seeing and going through right now is I've had to do a lot of acknowledging recently of my own, of realizing that there's a lot of perspectives and experiences out there that I haven't experienced or understood or seen before because of my own privilege. And now that I am seeing them, I have a tendency, as we all do, to kind of want to jump in and this is the right way, and we all need to be educated on this, and kind of get argumentative sometimes with people that don't understand it or are on the defense maybe about things in regard to their own white privilege. And so I've had some conversations on Facebook, as we probably all have. One that comes to mind was with a family member that I love and respect a great deal. But I had shared a meme, you know, a Black Lives Matter meme, and it kind of turned into this conversation of apology. And, well, I'm not going to apologize. This family member said they weren't going to apologize for these things because, you know, they've been through hard things too. Just because it wasn't because due to race doesn't, you know, mean that they haven't been through things. It was kind of like an all lives matter approach. And coming into this idea of, well, I shouldn't have to apologize because I came from a broken home too, and yada yada yada. So I kind of I took a minute to pause because I had some defensiveness, you know, and wanting to kind of slam in the point, you know, like just keep um just like do a powerful speech that's gonna like awaken them, kind of thing. And I stopped for a minute to reflect and uh kind of pause before I responded. And where I landed was this idea of recognizing that their experiences are real. And the experience that my family member shared was real. I respect this person so much because what she shared and has overcome. Um, and not using the word but and that she, you know, hasn't faced it due to the color of her skin. And so I think that people like might come across, you know, kind of negatively to this, oh, we should apologize kind of thing. And so if we can just start by, as someone always told me, being willing to be willing to look over there, to look that our perspective might not be the only one. It doesn't mean our perspective didn't happen or our perception of reality has been a complete lie. It's just kind of an acknowledgement that there is this other perspective out there. There's many other perspectives out there. And be willing to kind of look at that kind of from a space of, you know, how can I learn more about that? How can I educate myself on seeing that other perspective? And also acknowledging the fact that, yeah, if I'm somebody that hasn't experienced race, you know, it doesn't mean my heart is bad. It just means that I haven't seen that perspective. So I think a call to acknowledge first is where we can start. And then we can go from there. And we don't have to do it beautifully or perfectly. We just start with that. And then I think some of the other members of the panel are going to discuss some ways we can move from there. But
Yeah, no, and I really liked your example, Caron, because it showed your ability to have compassion for this person's story and how this person was um, having a reaction to other people's stories according to their own. So you validated that and invited still a different perspective, right? Like I loved that you said, and those issues that you went through weren't necessarily because of, you know, a racial concern. Yes, everybody has problems. Yes, everybody has challenges in life, but when everybody has challenges and then on top of it you have additional challenges because you are a Black member of our community, that is an added, you know, burden that many of us really don't even have to stop to think about. And that's the problem. We don't have to stop to think about it. So therefore it's not in our collective wisdom, right? It's not in our collective lived experience. I know, Jana, you have a lot of thoughts about kind of this, you know, space where how do we do our work in regards to being an ally and advocate, and while at the same time trying to bridge these divides with people that are kind of in defensive postures, and why maybe people are in defensive postures, and how important it is to have at least some people be willing to to bridge those divides, so that we can hopefully move forward as a larger entity than otherwise we would. So can you share some of your thoughts about where can we come at this, which I think has a lot to do with what Lisa and I talked about last time, that this is more of a systemic thing than an individual attack. But go ahead, Jana.
Yeah, it's amazing how we do tend to feel this as a personal attack. And I feel like everyone is kind of grappling for their own personal dignity and having their own opinions right now. I mean, I know that I've been involved in a lot of conversations online, and I am the first to say I am a right fighter, and it is so easy for me to get in on my high horse and to try to open up somebody else's eyes. It's so easy to do at times like this. And I love, Caron, what you said about taking a pause before responding. This is really important, and I forget to do it often. But taking a pause to really focus on the fact that everybody has valuable experience in their own lives. Everybody has valuable experience, and there's something that each of us can learn and be expanded by if we will do more listening than trying to educate, right? And I feel that tension in myself. I feel myself wanting to educate because I just know something and I need you to know it, right? But I think a couple of frames that are helpful for me, especially with the systemic stuff, is first of all, noticing that in any given system, whether it's the police force or religions or politics or societal structures, when we kind of rise to the top of leadership in any kind of system, it is typically because the system works for us. The system has been easier somehow for us to manage and to do well in, which actually makes it really hard for us to see. It's, as Natasha said, it's not in our collective wisdom to know what has been hard for other people. And that leads to one of the definitions of privilege that I like. Privilege has become a very heated word in all of this debate. People wield it as a weapon, and it makes it really hard for white people. They feel this collective guilt somehow, that somehow privilege should be a collective guilting experience. But I like to look at privilege as simply, if you are hearing that someone else has a problem with something in a system and you don't think it's a problem, then you probably have privilege in that thing. So it's a very simple definition. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just always worked for you. So I think with people as people with privilege, what it then becomes our responsibility to do is stop and listen to the people who are having the problem, because they actually have a leg up in seeing what the problems with the system are that we've never come across. So we're not aware. We're not aware. And when the system works for us and someone else is having a problem, what we tend to do is go to, well, they're doing something wrong because look, it works for me. Rather than understanding that actually the system, it's hard to see the systemic problems. So I think we're running up against that a little bit. And so when we have marginalized people saying, hey, there's a big problem, it's natural, it's normal for us in our egos to say, no, it's not, no, it's not. It's hard to look at ourselves. It's not easy. So how do we welcome some of the conflict that we're going through, and even when we're all doing it imperfectly, even when we're trying to teach each other and not listen, recognizing that with collective wisdom comes actually from having the discussions. Sometimes we just want to say, oh, it's getting too heated, I'm just going to not talk about it at all. But I think it's important to stay engaged, to stay in the discomfort, and to just take more pauses, take more time to pay attention to how it's landing with us. Try to figure out why I'm so uncomfortable around this thing. What assumptions am I having? And then have some conversations with some safe people in some safe spaces so you don't always feel embattled. But then bring it back to other people. And how can we lean in and give each other a little more dignity, a little more respect for our collective experience, and listen first. I'm saying this as much to myself as anybody else because I've done a crap job of it over the last week.
Yeah, no, I think we've all had opportunity to feel prickles and defensiveness and, like you said, right fight. As you were talking about privilege, it reminded me like of air conditioning privilege. Like we had a van growing up and there was no air conditioning in the back, but there was definitely air conditioning in the front. So, for the people in the front, you know, certain temperature was just fine and they're going along just fine while the rest of us in the back are like, we're dying back here, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? It's fine, is a very easy response from the people in the front. And so understanding that not everybody's on the same ride you are on, right? Not everybody is, and we have to just, you know, really be willing to call out that when we talk about white supremacy, which is another, you know, word that people really react with difficult feelings to, is that we're talking about a system where white people have been treated supreme to other, you know, to Black people specifically, and also people of color. So, and it's just kind of like you're born into an ocean. It's not your fault you're in the ocean, you know, it's just the ocean is the ocean. So we are all in these systems that, you know, come from generations and decades, if not millennia, that, you know, we've been grappling with many of these issues as a human race. So I think that what I want to get to next is that what we're seeing a lot of organizations, we're seeing a lot of some police departments, for example, a lot of businesses, a lot of all of the associations I belong to have been coming up with statements, right, as far as mental health. So we're seeing a lot of movement towards this space, which I see as really positive, of recognition, which is what Caron just brought up, acknowledgement, and then actually like responsibility taking. And part of that is apology making, right? Apology making. So I think as systems, that is a good place to go. And the reason I know that is because when we work with individuals, you know, we work more with individuals or families or couples, we know the power of healing that comes when people are willing to say, yeah, you know what, I probably, when I did that, even though maybe it wasn't intentional, I can see how that was not relationally good for us, right? Or I messed up as your spouse, or and then when you say I'm sorry, like those things are incredibly, repair attempts are just incredibly helpful and useful for mental wellness and for well-being. So Jen, I'd like to kind of turn it over to you a little bit about, just talk a little bit about your experience, either from, you know, your perspective as a clinician or even personally, as far as what is the power of apology?
I know, certainly in my own life, like it's been so powerful when people are willing to like acknowledge my feelings or apologize, or, you know, or when I've done that, it can be very healing and relationships definitely can endure. I know I see this a lot also in couples therapy and family therapy, and what a difference it can make if, you know, especially like a parent to a child, like I've messed up and I'm going to own this. Now, I've also seen this done in a way where like it's come across like, well, I've done this because of all these reasons. And so I was justified in doing it. And yes, I apologize for my action, but my intent wasn't bad. So it kind of like nulls the whole thing. And then like, and now it's your turn to forgive me. And that just doesn't go over very well. Isn't very helpful to kind of demand forgiveness or to make it all about you and your experience, rather than really reflecting what maybe they could be feeling and sharing that.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some of the quote unquote ingredients of a good apology and what makes a good apology. Because I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end of an I'm sorry, a sincere I'm sorry. And I'm sure we've also all been on the receiving end of I'm sorry you're feeling that way. In fact, I remember it was my own brother who called me out on that. He's like, you're really good at apologizing for how I'm feeling. And I'm like, what? I was already a therapist. I should have known better. So that was a good reminder for me, right? To really be careful about how I'm using the word I'm sorry. And it's interesting because I come from Spanish background. In Spanish, we have two words for I'm sorry. One is lo siento, I feel you. A lot of times the I'm sorry is more like I feel, I sympathize, I empathize. It's not a taking responsibility, right? It's more just like I'm sorrowful with you, or I'm angry with you, or I'm resonating with whatever it is. And but then the other one is perdón, which is forgive me. So that's more of a I'm sorry that I actually did something, to you that I need to take responsibility for. So I think, there's lots of, we're not going to be comprehensive necessarily in discussing all the components of a good apology, but I do think that the number one step is what we started out with, which is acknowledgement that there's an issue, being able to recognize how we participate in that issue. And since we're talking about a systemic apology here, it's not like we're going to go around, saying 500 I'm sorries to specific people, but we're as a system going to acknowledge, yes, we do benefit if we're white and living in a system where the laws and the cultures and the history have all pointed us in that direction. So we're going to acknowledge that. We're going to support systems that then offer clear, direct verbiage, right? So that's, I think, another good component of a good apology, whether you're doing it individually or as a system, is to be very direct and to say, this is what I take responsibility for. This is how I see the problem. I see how I participated in the problem. And there are people who I see on Facebook actually apologizing, like actually taking on their own white privilege and saying, I agree, I did benefit from this. And they're actually doing some of that individual work, but even systemically, you can think of it that way. And I think that, another big part of repentance, and it's interesting, like in Mormonism, right? When we all grew up, most of us grew up in the Mormon religion. And so we all grew up kind of knowing the steps of repentance. A big step of it is don't do it anymore. Like, stop doing what's hurtful, right? And of course, sometimes that's hard because, if I'm sorry because I yelled at my spouse, well, I'm probably going to yell at my spouse again, right? Like, I haven't perfected myself to the level that I'm never going to do that again. But it's at least I'm apologizing and working on that, working on yelling less or using other means of communication that are more effective. But yeah, I think it's not just a verbal and an acknowledgement and an intellectual process. It's a physical movement towards something else. Yeah, so I just want to, and Jana, you had some thoughts even about repentance and what it means and how we can do that with dignity. Why don't you share some thoughts there?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, how it's so common for us to feel like somehow if there's an apology to be made to someone who's been harmed, that somehow this is a zero-sum game. We get into this either-or kind of thinking where it's like either you were awful and you meant to cause harm and you must make reparations for me to be okay with being hurt, or I have to make your hurt go away so that I can feel like I'm an okay person. And we need to be better at being able to hold both of those things at the same time. This is not a zero-sum game. My intent may have been there to harm. It may not have been there to harm. It can be done from ignorance. We harm each other all the time without meaning to. And sometimes we feel like, oh my gosh, I can't apologize because I did nothing wrong. I'm sitting, I love your example of the air conditioning. Like, I can just imagine someone at the front of the van trying to tell the other person, spending time saying why I need to convince you that I'm not a horrible person, because I didn't realize, I didn't have the understanding of the capacity to know that you in the back of the van were hurting. At the same time, you've got the controls at the front of the van. We're not going to get anywhere until those people with the controls stop and listen, like we said. But as it comes to repentance, I think this gets in the way a lot. This mentality of I've got to maintain my own dignity even as I apologize. And so it's a lot of ego work that's happening. It's becoming aware of what we don't want to admit to and what we're okay to admit to. But a lot of it is, I just don't want you at the back of the van to see me as being selfish. But you don't have to have been selfish to also have been part of that system. So one of the things that I like as we look at repentance is the word in Greek that was used in the New Testament for repentance is this word metanoia. Noia is a root that pertains to the mind, and meta is a root that is talking about either being large or beyond. So it's either getting into a large mind or beyond into a new kind of a mind. And I like looking at repentance this way because it doesn't require me to have been awful. It doesn't require me to have been culpable personally for horrible things, especially systemically. But can I enlarge my mind as I listen to you? And can I come from a new perspective? And can I take on a new way of seeing what is happening in this system that then allows me to do something different, that includes your experience, something that I have been rightfully blind to. I just haven't had that experience. So can we be a little more kind to ourselves? And what would that do systemically to allow us to be a little more open to actually giving the apology and saving face? All of us are very interested in saving face. We're not going to get anywhere until we can sit in the dignity of each person and allow each person that dignity. So.
Yeah, and kind of mixed in with that is, another term that has become very popular. It's the name of a book that I highly recommend right now, White Fragility, right? Because when you mention the ego, that's we all have ego. We all have fragile aspects of ourselves. Most people are interested in being perceived as good, respectable, and kind, and those things. And so if those things matter to you, now you're having to face a reality that kind of juxtaposes that. That's where the ego comes in, and we get very defensive. And of course, the minute you're defensive, just so you know, you're in fight, flight, freeze mode. And just so you know, your IQ level has dropped by 10 points. So we're in what I teasingly like to call stupid brain. And so we're not oftentimes at our best places when we think we're all, full of great, energy to defend our positions, right? I know, Jen, you had some thoughts about that kind of went along with what Jana talks about with shame and guilt and kind of understanding the difference between those in healthier perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I've talked about this on podcast, and I just think this is an important concept to get, because I think sometimes this barrier of like how we're talking about how we're viewing ourselves, and what this means about us. Like sometimes we can confuse like maybe guilt and shame. And so an example of guilt would be like, okay, I made a mistake. Shame would be, I am a mistake. Yes, I've done bad things in my life and I know better and I want to do better. I'm educating myself now and I'm going to move to a better place is a lot different than like, I'm a horrible, bad person. Like if we're stuck in that shame cycle, it's going to be a lot harder for us to change. And so sometimes some people get really depressed when they get into that, or they get really defensive. And so if we can kind of really get more curious and about our reactions, if it would, depending on, if we are getting super defensive, maybe we're looking at this in a way where we're viewing, oh, I'm a bad person, instead of like, what can I learn? And especially, I mean, I always say like, all feelings are valid. And what I mean by that is like, let's get curious about how we're feeling. Let's stop instead of feeling so guilty about our feelings that we can't move forward, you know? And in this discussion, you know, when we are talking to, especially, well, anyone, and if they're telling us about their experience, and if they've experienced racism, let's listen to that. And let's be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's your valid experience. And I want to listen to that and understand it better.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point of self-reflection, because if you're constantly coming back to your own experience or your own defensive posture, you might want to consider, am I am I leaning in my own life in general ways towards a shame structure? Am I having to be so protective of my ego and my, you know, reputation, because in a lot of ways maybe I haven't done my own work to really be in a confident place versus a defensive space, right? So that's kind of an interesting way to look at that. And I like Jana's kind of you know, invitation to think, especially for those of us who maybe still feel religious or spiritual in some way, or come from religious backgrounds, which is most of us, where all of this language, if you really think about it, is an invitation to shift and change, whether it's repentance, whether it's transcendence, whether it's resurrection, whether it's, you know, conversion, whether it's, I mean, I'm sure, you know, there's 500 words, I'm sure, and they all have to do with kind of this ongoing growth and invitation to ongoing change. I guess while you were talking, Jen, I thought, you know, we don't need for people to be awful. We need for people to change and to be open and to be receptive, which is kind of where Caron started out. So Caron, we've been talking a lot. What are your thoughts? What are you coming up with in regards to just reflecting from what everybody shared so far?
Well, I love what everybody shared so far. I love that we don't have to be evil or bad to acknowledge the perspective of another person. That we don't, that it doesn't have to be this, you know, your perspective versus my perspective kind of argument. Something that came up for me uh, in the last couple of minutes was thinking this just about like going back to that pause. If we go to respond, or we go to speak, or we go to defend, just asking ourselves before we do it, what is my intention? Is my intention to connect and try to understand something or be open? Or is my intention a place, like you said, of defensiveness, where either I'm defending my own shame or my own self or my own story? And I know it's been said by very many people that are more experts at this than me, but that we don't want to be just defending, like, for example, white privilege right now. We have safe spaces where we can be seen in that and understood in that and validated in what it's like for us. But I think you know, as far as, you know, what we're putting out there to the media, especially like we've talked about different systems and stuff, it needs to be not in a place of defensiveness over our experience. It needs to be more of an open understanding of an intention to connect, an intention to see, an intention to understand, an intention to change, like Natasha said, to take it to that next step after we apologize. You know, change is necessary, or otherwise our apology doesn't mean a lot.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would just kind of, my thoughts were going, and is on that intention, getting very clear within ourselves, whether we need to talk about it with a friend who can see us and help us work through it, a therapist, a whoever we need to do to get clear on what our intention is, and then what could be the ramifications of that intention.
I love that. And I love it because it kind of leads us to kind of the closing thoughts, which is, now how do we move into action, right? How do we move into the work of healing and changing and doing our part as the people who have enjoyed privilege, it really, the responsibility lies more on us than anybody else. So I think a great way to start is educating yourselves. I know our Symmetry Solutions page, we've been really committed in sharing a lot of resources. So we have resources for how to talk to your kids about race, how to talk to your teens about race, how to, just things that you can educate yourselves on. I would say, have you been listening to Black voices? Have you been listening to videos? I know in my own personal page, I've been sharing a lot of videos, both from clinicians and activists and things like that. Are you donating your monies to organizations that are committed to helping the systemic changes happen that need to be happening? Black Lives Matter is one. There's many, NCAA. There's lots of different organizations out there that are really committed and are very well equipped to know how to, sometimes when we want to help, it's like the American Red Cross, right? A lot of times they're like, don't bring us blankets, like give us money, because we know how to put that money to use. So how do we put money into the hands of people who know how to put it into use, know how to lobby, know how to do the things that they need to be doing politically? How do we get involved, by in some way in our own comfort levels with activism, whether that's sharing a post on Facebook, whether that's going to a march or a protest, whether or not that's talking to politicians in your area, or even making changes in your own influences. Do you own a business? Are you understanding wage gap issues within your own realm of where you work, or things? I mean, there's just all kinds of ways. So the action piece, I think, is a huge piece of the apology. I think the apology is so healing and helpful for people, because the gaslighting ends when the apologizing begins, right? It's now like we're taking responsibility. There's no more, well, but this is really your problem or your feelings or your issue. No, we're taking responsibility. Gaslighting can make people feel crazy. And I think that's how a lot of Black people and people of color have felt for a long time. Like our voices just can't even permeate what we're trying to say here. And our white fragility has gotten in the way of being able to listen correctly. So this is a call out for all of us to do work. And again, coming from the Mormon perspective, the song, the pioneer spirit and the put your shoulder to the wheel is, I mean, we're workers, we're doers. We come from this culture where most of us like to be involved charitably and service-wise and volunteer energy. So there's lots of things that we can look into. And there's a lot of work that we need to do within, for those who still participate in Mormonism, there's a lot of work that needs to be done within that construct as well. So any final thoughts from anybody? I feel like I've been rambling, but.
I think I'll just say sometimes it can be intimidating, especially if we haven't done a lot of social action before, or, like, what do I do? How do I do it? And there are a lot of opinions about how this should be done. And I just will put a plug in for self-awareness and knowing yourself and knowing your own strengths and knowing you do not have to be everything in all of this. Look for the places that call to you. Maybe you're more of a person that wants to work with people on the ground and want to actually, get your hands dirty. For some people, maybe you are more of a teacher. For some people, you want to do bigger actions. For some people, you just have a way of organizing good ideas, or whatever it is. Everyone has their different strengths. Don't feel like what you bring is not enough. Just bring what is calling to you. And that will be more than enough, because if it's coming genuinely from you, it will be amplified. So just try not to be intimidated, and just work to your strengths.
Thank you. Any other closing thoughts? All right. Well, here at Symmetry, we just want to, give again our commitment to being part of the solution. And both, I think we're all committed to doing that as individuals, also as clinicians and coaches, and also in the greater world. If you want to find out more about our practice or anything, that's at symmetrysouls.com, SOLS. And we have a Facebook page where we're sharing a lot of resources if you're interested in looking up books or websites or podcasts or videos. So we're trying to share a lot of things like that could be helpful to your own, your own transcendent journey into new spaces. And with that, I hope everybody has a great weekend. So thanks everybody for joining me. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.